Hello everyone, welcome to Mr. Rankington. Today, I decided to talk about the Banjo-Kazooie series. Now, since there's only so few games as of this recording, I decided to go over all of them. Now, if you've watched or rather listened to this show before, then you'll know that I won't be counting the ports as separate rankings, I'll just briefly mention them. Also, like the previous episodes, I'll be going from worst to best, or least favorite to most favorite, depending on how you look at it. So, let's get started without further delay. Something seems a bit mixed up about that. First up is Banjo Pilot. This game had potential of being a decent game, but at the end of the day, it's kind of bland. For those of you who don't know, this was originally going to be Diddy Kong Pilot, a sequel to Diddy Kong Racing, but long story short, it became Banjo Pilot. Anyway, the physics in this game are kind of weird. I mean, even though you're in a plane, you can still slow down if you're off the track, and all the tracks are like flat, which I get the Game Boy Advance couldn't handle all that much, but I feel like it could have done a little bit better than what it did. And overall, it's just kind of a meh game. Not really bad, but not good either. So, I wouldn't really recommend this to anyone but collectors of the Banjo-Kazooie franchise. And next on the list is Banjo-Kazooie Gruntys Revenge. Now, unlike the previous game, this game is actually pretty good for a GBA Banjo-Kazooie game. One thing I'm really glad they didn't do with this game was made it isometric. Instead they went with overhead, which those are kind of the same thing, except isometric is more tilted and stuff. And for most platformers on GBA, that's not good. Like, those are usually pretty bad. Anyway, for a portable Banjo-Kazooie game, this is pretty good and pretty accurate to the console versions. I mean, yeah, due to the power of the GBA, they couldn't do everything, and they kind of made some weird decisions here and there, but overall, I think it's a fine game. But the thing is, I think I mostly feel that way because this is pretty much the only way you can play Banjo-Kazooie portably right now, at least in terms of being a more traditional type Banjo-Kazooie game. So if they were to ever port the original Banjo-Kazooie games on like the Switch or just some way portably, then I wouldn't find much of a reason to come back to this one. I mean, not that it doesn't have its own story, it's just that in terms of being a traditional Banjo-Kazooie game on the go, you know. Now, if they ever remade this game for a portable system like the Switch or something else, and they made it in the style of the original Banjo-Kazooie games, then there wouldn't be a reason for me to come back to this game at all, but, you know. Now, in terms of the other versions of this game, there are a couple of, like, phone versions, I think, of this game, but I think I'll just stick to GBA. But anyway, I would recommend this game, at least right now when it comes to playing Banjo-Kazooie portably. Well, this will be fun. This will be very controversial. The next game on the list is Banjo-Tooie. Now let me start this off by saying I actually really like this game, and I think it's a really good follow-up to the original Banjo-Kazooie, plus the multiplayer can be pretty fun. But here's the thing. I'm definitely not the first one to say this, nor will I be the last, but the game is a bit too big. Now, I have no problem with collectathon platformers being really big, but this game, it doesn't really match all that well. By that, I mean, I'm factoring in things like how fast Banjo's walking speed is, how fast you can go, how convoluted the levels are, how spread out everything is. It feels like it's a lot bigger just for the sake of being a lot bigger. Plus, having the slight Metroidvania feel to it makes it a little too confusing at times. So, while there's a lot of improvements over the original Banjo-Kazooie in this game, there's also a lot about it that just doesn't sit well with me. It is not at all a bad game. I actually enjoyed some of it, but not all of it. Despite my problems, I would still highly recommend this game. It's still a lot of fun. In terms of which version you should choose, I would say go with the 360 version, at least for the single player, because while the multiplayer is still good on there, you have to be online for some reason, even for split screen. It's kind of dumb, so if you were to go mostly for multiplayer, I would sort of recommend the N64 version just a little bit more. Well, if Tooie was the previous one, you can probably take a guess on which one is the next. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Let me go ahead and say this. I don't think this is a very good follow-up to Banjo-Tooie. I don't think this is very good as a Banjo-Kazooie game. Plus, the way they made the characters look, I'm not the biggest fan of that art style at all. Like, the environments look fine, but it's things like the squareness of all the characters, like Banjo's nose, for example, and things like that just, they're not very good for Banjo-Kazooie. But looking at this as its own game, I do like it more than Banjo-Tooie. Like, the controls are fine for the most part. I mean, with the vehicles, the physics can be a little weird, but once you get used to them, they can be pretty decent. And speaking of the vehicles, I always thought it was pretty cool the way you could build your own. I mean, if you don't build it exactly right, then the physics get a little wonky, but, you know, I like that. The fact that you can build vehicles, not the wonkiness. Plus, I found the multiplayer to be pretty decent. And while the environments are a lot bigger here even than Tooie, you get to go around a little faster with the vehicles, depending on what all you add to it. So overall, while the game is not a good Banjo-Kazooie game, I think it's a really good game on its own. So I would definitely recommend this game. If you are a Banjo-Kazooie fan, try to see this as a spin-off. That might help you enjoy it a little more. I don't know that for sure. Well, that only leaves one game left. The original Banjo-Kazooie. Yep, the very original Banjo-Kazooie is my favorite Banjo-Kazooie game. Now, I didn't really grow up with this game. I only played like the demo at a mall or something most of the time, and just bits and pieces here and there, so I didn't really play through the whole thing until I was already a teenager. Basically where I'm getting at is, it's not nostalgia that makes me really like this game. I just find this game to be almost perfectly sized for what it is. It's got really nice controls for the time, I mean even today. It's got really nice unlockable moves, it's got really nice music, really nice environments, and the hub world for the most part is really interesting. I mean, I do get lost in it time to time, but when it comes to the levels, those are really nice. The levels are almost perfectly sized, they're not too small and they're not too big with the exception of Click Clock Wood. My only real issue with the game, at least the N64 version, is that all the little collectibles, which are the musical notes, if you die, you have to collect them all again for them to count as completing the level. Well, if you die without getting them all anyway. Plus, some of the challenges are kind of annoying, but other than that, I really like this game. So of course, I would highly recommend this game. If there was going to be one Banjo-Kazooie game you were ever going to play this one. In terms of which version, I would go with the 360 version. Not by a long shot, it's more so just because of the musical note thing. They fixed that, so that's why I would recommend that. But if you want a physical copy, your only option right now is the N64 version. Well, that wraps things up for today. I hope you enjoyed, and go ahead and comment on what kind of franchise I should talk about next, or some other time, in this type of video. But until then, like this video if you like it, and subscribe if you want to see more of these or any other types of videos, and thanks for watching and or listening.